Hi everybody, today I'm working on a 2003 Mini Cooper S. I need to replace the motor in this car. It's been a while since I made my last engine removal video, and I think I've figured out some ways to make the job go a lot faster. So I'm gonna go through and just see how quickly I can get this done. I'll put a little timer in the video here and we'll keep track. So here goes. Ready, set, go. So this is basically going to be a real-time video. I'll cut out the boring parts. And the first thing we'll do is remove the front wheels. Then we'll disconnect the outer ball joints and the steering tie rod end. Whack with the hammer. Before I get ahead of myself too far, we should probably drain the engine oil, the coolant, and the transmission fluid. So we'll pull the radiator hose clamp and drain the coolant. We'll take the cap off to speed things up. And unscrew the bleed valve. And we'll go ahead and drain the engine oil next. While we're waiting for the oil to drain, we'll go ahead and remove the front bumper. Get these crash tubes out of here. Tap them out with a hammer. Disconnect the rest of the wiring here, and we'll remove the front clips. Loosen the bolts for the radiator. Disconnect the fan. Unplug the fog lights. Remove the top radiator hose clamp. We'll drop the air conditioner condenser and pull the front clip off. Next, we'll drain the gear oil. This is an 8mm hex. And while we're waiting for that to drain, we can go ahead and start taking apart stuff on the top here again. So I'll start to remove the air box and the various connections. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. We need to disconnect the negative battery terminal. We'll disconnect the ECU. Pull back the hose and the battery cable connections. And pull the airbox out. Next, we'll remove the intercooler. We have to do this because there's wiring running underneath, and we need to pull the wiring harness away from the engine to disconnect it. And we'll disconnect these connections here. We'll move this fuse box out of the way. Remove the intercooler. Disconnect the fuel line. Remove these vacuum lines here for the fuel vapor recirculation. And we'll just push these out of the way. Remove the coil pack wiring. Disconnect the fuel injector wiring. Get this engine mount out of the way. And disconnect the cam sensor wiring. So this allows us to pull this first wiring harness back and away from the engine. Let's disconnect some of this stuff here down by the throttle body. Get this throttle body. We'll get the intake and breather hose out of the way. Disconnect some more wiring. Disconnect the thermostat coolant temperature sending unit. Pull some more wiring through. And we'll remove the brake boost vacuum line. Just pull it up and out. Alright, before we remove the engine, we need to take the compressor off of the side of the engine here so I don't have to discharge the system. So I'll go get my belt remover tool for that. And we'll pull the belt off. And next we'll remove the compressor wire here. Then it's held on by 13mm bolts. 2 in the front and 1 on the bottom. And this allows us to swing all the AC stuff clean out of the way. Alright, next we'll unplug the alternator. Pull this wiring out of the bracket here. Disconnect the crank position sensor. Continue to peel back the wiring. Alright, now we'll remove the clutch slave cylinder. Okay, let's disconnect the shift linkage. I got to be careful with this one. The bushing is torn part way through. Let's do the other one first. There we go. That's a little touch and go there because it's so much torn. And then we just push them out of the bracket. Alright, let's remove this heat shield. And that will let us access, there's another heat shield underneath and there's a 10mm bolt here in between the header. So I can pull the temp oil sending unit off here Pull the heat shield back. Okay, next let's remove the axles. 32mm nut on the end here. So the axle on the left here just pops right out. You just stick a pry bar up in here and just pop it. The one on the right's a little more involved. We're going to have to remove the power steering fan and this engine mount here. And then underneath here there's a carrier bracket, and we'll need to remove 3 13mm bolts, and then we can just pull the axle straight out. Alright, now we can see those carrier bracket bolts. The first two are relatively easy. The third one is up a little bit hard to access. You might want to use like a deep drive 13mm socket to go around the top here. Or I've got a flex head 13mm wrench which works really well. They come out basically by hand, so that's good. There's a little gap here I can get my wrench in. Then I can finish loosening just by using the tips of my fingers. This axle's not held in by a clip at all. We just pull and it'll come right out of the transmission. Okay, axle number 2. Alright, now we got to get under here and disconnect the power steering wiring. And the thick hose, there's no clip, it's just held in by pressure, so you just wiggle and pull out. Alright, next we want to push this heat shield back out of the way a little bit so we can disconnect the starter motor wiring. There's a 13mm right here, and then back here, you can't see it very well, there's a 10mm up in the middle. So we'll pull both of those, and that will allow us to back all this wiring out of here. Sometimes it's held on to the starter motor or brackets by zip ties, so you just cut those and then you can pull it on up. Disconnect the 10mm first. And do the same for the 13. And we can pull the wiring on off. Alright, next we're going to remove the oil cooler heater pipes here. There's a couple of clips, you just clip and pull back. Next we'll disconnect the exhaust. And these are about, about 8 10mm bolts. After I disconnect the exhaust and the rest of the accessible wiring for the engine, I'll hook up the cherry picker, lift up the engine off of the mounts and pull it forward just a little bit, just enough that I can get my hand in there, and pull the rest of that wiring through. There's also one 10mm bolt underneath holding the those oil cooler heater pipes onto the bottom of the engine, so we'll need to remove that 10mm bolt as well. Okay, last one. So I think we can see and maybe, pull these wire up out of the way here. I can just barely see the 10mm bolt there. I'll put a super long extension on it to get it out. There it goes. Alright, let's work on the thermostat housing here next. Alright, that lets us pull back the thermostat housing. I've still got this piece in the way though, so I'm probably going to need to figure out a way to get this this broken nut out. There we go. Alright, we need to disconnect 2 heater hose connections, this guy right here and then this one on the bottom. Alright, there's a couple of zip ties here. I'm going to cut these so I can pull this wiring up and out. I've cut this zip tie. And now we can pull the high voltage lines out of the way. And the rest of the low voltage lines, for the most part, are going to be attached to this guy here, which I call the octopus. So there's a clip here, but before that there's a small 10 mil bolt in front of the throttle body. So I'll remove the throttle body first. I'll wiggle this line off if I can. Alright, we'll get that 10 mil bolt here. And we can wiggle it off on the front side. And then I think there's one last electrical connection to the backup sensor here underneath for the transmission. Sorry, you can't see it. Now I'll grab a screwdriver and push back on this clip here towards the passenger side of the car, the right side of the car, while pulling up. And then wiggle it off of that 10 mil thing that was there. And that lets us take all this wiring and put it over here where it's not in the way at all. Alright, now we'll take the clutch slave cylinder hydraulics. We'll do the same thing. We'll kind of rotate and flop it up out of the way here. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to do one last check, but I think we've now reached the point that the engine is no longer connected to the car in any way except for the engine mounts. Oh, there's one ground strap here. Got to pull that too. Then we'll remove this engine mount nut. And I think I'm gonna suspend the motor from here, right here. And then I have a L bracket that I'm gonna install right here. And that'll balance things pretty good. So I'll hook it up to the cherry picker, suspend it, and then I'll pull this bolt here, and then we should be able to just pick it up and take it on out. Oh, this mount has to come off too. So I'll take this off, put my bracket on here. I made just an L bracket. You could also use this eyelet here on the transmission, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and use my bracket because it moves the chain position over a little bit, so there's less chance of your chain rubbing against the valve cover. Alright, let's go get the cherry picker. I'll hook one up. Okay, I'm going to carefully remove this bolt. Looks like we need to raise it just a little bit. There we go. So this mount's going to be in the way to pull the engine out, so I'll remove the mount. Alright, the entire weight of the engine is now on the cherry picker. So lift it up just a little bit. Let's see if we can clear the engine mount here. There we go. Alright, now we'll do a final check and make sure there's nothing still connected. Looks like the heater hose connections are disconnected, the exhaust is disconnected, starter motor wiring, power steering wiring has been disconnected. I think we got all the wiring out of there. We'll slowly pull back. Let's lower just a little bit. And it looks like we are clear. We'll lower it just a little more. And kind of rotate it as we pull it out of here. We'll lower it just a little more. Alright, it is completely free of the car. Let me just pull it out of here. So we'll back it on out. And there you have it. One Mini Cooper with the engine and transmission removed. Subframe is still in place. And I did this job in this much time, which is not bad if I say so myself. Assembly is in reverse of disassembly. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.